Well, welcome to our Tuesday live leadership chats. Today, I'm talking with Matt Destry from Discovery Church. Matt and Jody are the senior ministers of Discovery Church. And today we're talking about storytelling in leadership. I can't wait for this topic today. My name is Kylie Butler, and I'm a part of Christian Coaching Institute, which is Australia's leading Christian coaching organisation. We've been coaching and training leaders in coaching for over 10 years now. So welcome, Matt. It is so great to have you with us today.
It's awesome
before
to
we
be
jump
here.
in, it is good. Before we jump in, tell us a little bit about who you are, what role you're fulfilling, and what's some stuff that you love doing.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, my wife Jody and I lead Discovery Church. We live out in the Yarra Valley in Victoria, which is a beautiful part of the world. We have two kids, Lucy who's 14 and Finn who's 12. And so they're a lot of fun as well. We lead Discovery Church, which is a larger regional church out here in Mount Evelyn. So just kind of nestled in right between the Yarra Valley and then the Dandenong Ranges, which is beautiful. And for fun, I mean, I love to read. I love movies. I go to the gym regularly. Since lockdowns happened, I actually bought my own home gym and just got that set up. So just kind of, just work with what we've got. So yeah, so I love to keep active, love to get outside. I love good food. And so that's a little bit about me.
That's great. And as we think around our topic today, we're chatting earlier, as leaders, we're involved in vision, mission, strategy, team building, kind of those mechanics of leadership, and they are really important. But what are some other things that you reckon are just as important that kind of sit alongside that?
Yeah, sure. So I think leadership is a mixture of hard and soft skills. There are those things that we need to know how to do, how to administrate a budget, how to lead a team meeting, how to set a vision and hold people to a set of, values or goals that then we're going to work towards over time. But then there's also a lot of soft skills as well that are involved. Empathy, connection with people. And so it is a bit of, there's function, but there's also form. There's a science to it, but there's also an art. And I think on the artistic side, the form side is the idea of storytelling, the function of storytelling for leaders to be the chief storyteller of your organization. I think that's really, really important for leaders today.
Yeah, and it's such a big, important topic, but probably not an easy one. So as you think around kind of stories that leaders need to understand or get a hold of, what sort of things are they?
Yeah, great. So the important thing with storytelling is information or data tells us what things are, what they are objectively. But stories tell us what things mean. And so for leaders to be the Simon Sinek way of saying it's keepers of the why, holding on to that why, the stories around us tell us what things mean. And you can get people to do things and they'll do them from a compliance perspective, but engaging the heart is where you need storytelling. And so a couple of things that I think leaders need to understand is firstly the story of your industry. So you might be a window cleaner, you might be a gym owner, you might be the pastor of a church, whatever it is, but the story of your industry, where did it start? Who were the key players? How did we get to where we are now? Where is your industry moving towards? As a church leader and somebody who is framed and shaped by the story of God, that big meta narrative of creation, fall, redemption, and recreation is the biggest story we could be a part of. That's the story of our industry, if you like, even though it feels a bit cheap to say it like that. But there might be a whole host of other more localized stories in terms of, you might think about the church in Australia and the story of that and where that's going that might shape it. So that'll be the first thing, story of industry. Second one would be the story of your own organization. So leaders need to be the cultural archaeologists of their organization. So kind of digging through the soil and going down through the layers and going, okay, how did our organization begin? Who were the key players? What were the things that were on the people's hearts and minds who began this? Now, it's going to be a different story if you were the founder or the pioneer of your organization, because it's a little bit more connected with the next point. But yeah, to do that kind of cultural exegesis on your own community or your own organization, to find out what sits in the soil there, what are the things that are really important or have been important, helps us be able to understand where we are now. So industry organization, the third one is just the story of your own life. This is, I think, the big one for leaders right now. And it's a big topic, I think, that we're starting to talk about now as leaders, which is, where have I come from? What are some of the shaping and framing stories of my own life? And now I know as coaches or life coaches or in coaching, that this is a biggie, right? And there's a whole world of narrative coaching for people, and even narrative therapy, where we help step other people through their own life, their own experiences, their own stories, and how we bring that into every room that we walk into. And now it's one thing to be able to understand that for others, but how are we understanding that for ourselves, the leader and their own story? Because sometimes that's the one thing that trips us up, right? Is a lack of understanding about our own stories. So.
And so this idea of stories for industry, for organization, and for self, like, when do you use kind of this idea of stories?
Yeah, great. In terms of vision setting or mission setting, or coming to set a sense of values for your organization, some of this stuff is really, really important, because you're not just pulling ideas out of the air. You're not just going, oh yeah, we want to be an organization based on excellence. Cool. Yeah. There's a word that we can use, but it's like, but why? Where did that, has that been a cornerstone, a key part of our organization? Or is that something in our industry that people really care about? You might be an accountant and you might run an account. Now, excellence is something, as a client, I really want in my accountancy. You know, that's in my accountant. I really want that. Whereas it might not be so important in some other areas. It will really depend on your understanding of where that comes from. So in setting up those things, but also then being able to establish a culture, it helps to be able to have cultural markers in the history or in the story that says, hey, remember, we're a people who were like, who really care about this. Hey, remember when this happened? That means we really, we don't walk past that. We engage with that and we deal with that, or we really strive for that, or whatever that might be. So in setting the culture of your organization, understanding those stories are really important.
Yeah. And so there might be some leaders that are watching this going, oh, I know how to do this, or there's others that are going, I have no idea where to even start, but I know I need to grow in this area. Like, what's some things that they could do or grow in, or what would you recommend there?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things in terms of telling stories, thinking about storytelling as something that your organization tells in many, many ways. So you communicate as an organization in so many ways: film, print, digital, spoken word. There's a lot of different modalities that for the way that we can tell stories. And so it's important to realize that we've got all of these things at our fingertips. Social media is another great one. All these ways we can engage. One of the things that is really awesome about one thing that takes a story from being okay to being amazing is specificity. So being really tight on detail. Stories thrive on details. It's one thing to say, oh, a guy walked down the street and saw a bird. But if you can pack detail into that story, it brings the story to life. As leaders, though, we don't often like dealing with detail. We like thinking big picture. We like thinking grand schemes, blue sky, and all of that. whereas we have to really dial down into the detail and the specifics to make those stories really clear. Another thing would be movement. So where's your story going? A story without movement's just a vignette. You know, it's like sometimes it's a scene and a scene's been set, but you're kind of asking yourself, well, what's happening here? Where's this going? If it's not going anywhere, it might be evocative. It might be an evocative image, but it's not something that's going to really drive action. Thirdly, I'd say ownership. For leaders and organizations to really tell a story, they have to own it. You know this when you're at a dinner party or you're sitting around a fire and someone's telling a story and they're into it. They've owned the story. They're not telling it like secondhand or somebody told me. You know, they're invested in that story and in telling of that story. And then fourthly, I'd say it's also humility, which almost sounds a counterpoint to that last one, because sometimes when we're hearing a story, we want it to be told. We want the storyteller to kind of move out of the way or fade into the background, use their gifts to tell it, but also so that we can engage with the content. And sometimes organizations come along and they're so invested in their own story and you think, oh my gosh, but what do you do? You've just told us all about how great and how awesome you are, but we want to find out what's the juice here that you're really offering.
Yeah.
So I think there's some important things in terms of telling those stories as a leader or an organization.
That's so good. And Matt, we're talking earlier, and we didn't. I didn't prep this one, which I seem to do in the coaching in this space. You've done some coach training, and you coach other leaders. How can coaching and storytelling how could they connect together, do you reckon?
Yeah, fantastic. When I'm working with leaders, I'm always looking for themes. So I'm trying to pick up on themes and then joining those dots together over time, asking really good questions. And I know that this is it's almost like the one thing as a coach to do, but I think it's important. It leads into this storytelling stuff, and not rushing to solve problems with the kind of quick slap on a Band-Aid answers, but really dig deeper and sometimes kind of really even twist the knife in a little bit just to see if there's any more that the person you're coaching wants to give, because sometimes it's in that last little 10% that you find, oh, okay, now we're actually at the real issue. And storytelling always, every time, revolves around what's the real issue. And so if we can get to that, and there's not that many real issues out there. I mean, you can boil them down, and you could probably tell me what they are in terms of human motivation and fears and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think looking for themes is something for me that helps bring that narrative to bear in somebody's life. And you can help them say, okay, well, you've said that a number of times, or this issue seems to be a theme across your life. What do you think is going on there? Those kinds of things can be really important for coaches.
Yeah, so good. Matt, thank you. There is so much in what you've talked around here. If you have a book or a resource that you could refer people to, what would you put them towards?
Yeah, great. There's some really, really good resources out there. Anything Donald Miller has done a lot of really good work in the storytelling space. His company Story Brand is something it's really well known, but also is helpful, particularly in the corporate advertising space around this. There is a book by a lady by the name of Bobette Buster, so great name, and the book title is Do Story. And I would encourage you to go and find that. She has done a lot of what we've talked about here through many different and very wide-ranging organizations, and she's got a lot of great stuff to say about storytelling in organizations and leadership as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your just incredible insight on some of those soft skills of leadership, and in particular storytelling. Can't wait to see what people might actually use with that. So thank you, and been great to connect with you today. And for those that are watching, we look forward to seeing you next week at Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Have a great day.
See you guys.